My wife and her lawyer lover stole my $7.7 million, then I discovered Grandpa's 1960 account that turned the tables completely. My name is Michael Brennan, and I'm 45 years old. 3 months ago, I was worth nearly $7.7 million. I owned a thriving HVAC distribution company, lived in a stunning Victorian estate with wraparound porches, and had 2 kids finishing up at Ivy League schools. Today, I'm about to tell you how losing absolutely everything led me to discover something that changed my entire existence. When my ex-wife Claire and her attorney boyfriend Gregory stripped me bare and mocked me to my face, I genuinely believed I had nothing left worth living for. But sometimes the universe works in peculiar ways, and the greatest blessings arrive wearing the disguise of complete catastrophe. "Mike, you're absolutely pathetic," Claire had sneered, standing in the marble courthouse corridor with Gregory Mansfield's arm draped possessively around her shoulders. 22 years of marriage, and you never suspected a thing. Some entrepreneur you turned out to be. Gregory adjusted his Armani tie with that insufferable smirk. "Nothing personal, Michael." "Well, actually, I suppose it's intensely personal now, isn't it?" They both erupted in laughter, the sound ricocheting off those cold marble walls like shrapnel tearing through my chest. I just stood there in my only remaining Brooks Brothers suit, watching them stride away with everything I'd painstakingly built from absolutely nothing. The business I'd launched in a converted barn. The house where my children learned to ride bikes in the circular driveway. The investment accounts holding $7.7 million. Even primary custody of Dylan and Natalie, my 20-year-old twins who were supposed to be adults but apparently weren't in the eyes of the law. "Go ahead and sue me," Claire called mockingly over her designer shoulder. "Oh wait, you can't afford legal representation anymore. I'm completely untouchable now, Mike." Gregory made absolutely certain of that. 3 months later, I was down to my final $980, existing in a studio apartment that perpetually smelled like stale grease and crushing defeat. That's when I remembered an ancient savings account my grandfather Walter had opened the day I was born. It should have contained maybe $50. I figured I might as well close it out, perhaps treat myself to one decent steak dinner. But when the bank representative pulled up that account and her face drained of all color, when she summoned her supervisor with visibly trembling hands, when they both stared at that computer monitor like they'd witnessed something supernatural, I knew something absolutely extraordinary was unfolding. "Mr. Brennan," the manager whispered, his voice barely audible. "This account has been accumulating compound interest since 1960. He rotated the screen toward me, and what I saw nearly buckled my knees right there on that polished bank floor, the woman who thought she'd completely destroyed me. The lawyer who believed he'd decisively won. They had absolutely no comprehension of what was coming, because my grandfather, a humble automotive plant worker who never earned more than $16,000 annually, had just reached across the decades from beyond the grave to rescue his grandson in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. This is that story. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of what happened next. I need you to understand exactly who I was before everything imploded, because that's the only way you'll truly grasp how catastrophically far I fell, and how completely blind I'd been to what was happening directly under my nose. Brennan Climate Solutions started in a rented barn outside Philadelphia back in 2003. I was 24 years old with an engineering degree, a pregnant wife, and exactly $14,000 my father James had left me when cancer took him. Every morning at 4:30, I'd kiss Claire's growing belly goodbye and drive to that converted barn where I'd organize inventory until my first contractors arrived. HVAC professionals knew they could count on me to stock exactly what they needed, precisely when they needed it, at honest prices. "You're going to collapse from exhaustion," Claire would say during those early years, massaging my shoulders while I hunched over spreadsheets at our kitchen table. "The babies need a father present, not just a paycheck." The babies were Dylan and Natalie, twins who arrived during a February ice storm. I remember cradling them for the first time, these impossibly tiny perfect humans, and vowing I'd provide them everything I never had growing up. My childhood hadn't been desperately poor exactly, but we perpetually lived paycheck to paycheck. My grandfather Walter had worked the Ford assembly line for 42 years. My father had been a facilities manager at a regional hospital. Honest, respectable work, but never quite enough to stop the constant anxiety about money. By the time the twins turned 11, I'd expanded the business into a massive 18,000 square foot distribution center. We employed 47 people, including my younger brother Kevin, who managed our entire logistics fleet, and my cousin Brian, who handled all commercial contracts. Thursday mornings, I'd meet with Donald Patterson, my accountant, at Harrigan's Diner on Lancaster Pike. "Mike, you've created something genuinely remarkable here," Donald would say, spreading quarterly reports between our coffee mugs and plates of corned beef hash. "Most businesses collapse within 5 years. You're approaching 17 years with 22% annual growth." The numbers were extraordinary. We'd secured the exclusive contract supplying Morrison Commercial Builders, the dominant construction firm across 5 states. That single account generated $2.3 million annually. Combined with our other commercial relationships and retail operations, we were generating $8.7 million in annual revenue. After operational expenses and strategic investing, I'd accumulated that beautiful figure, $7.7 million in various investment accounts. Our Victorian estate in Chester County was everything Claire had fantasized about when we were young and struggling. 7 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a pool with a cabana, and a gourmet kitchen she'd renovated 4 separate times. She'd quit her position as a pharmaceutical sales rep after Dylan and Natalie started elementary school, dedicating herself to what she termed cultivating our social capital. "The Brandywine Club isn't merely about tennis, Mike," she'd explain when I questioned the astronomical membership fees. "It's where substantial deals materialize, where critical connections happen." She was probably correct. Several major contracts had originated from executives I'd met at club networking events, though I rarely had time to attend them myself. Claire attended the ladies' luncheons, the charity auctions, the wine appreciation courses. She'd return home discussing various members, their vacation properties in the Hamptons, their Mediterranean cruises. Gregory Mansfield's name started appearing in these conversations approximately 18 months before everything detonated. "His firm handles all the high-net-worth divorces," she'd mentioned casually one evening while folding laundry. "Made senior partner at 36. Can you even imagine?" I couldn't imagine because I was perpetually busy actually working. My typical day commenced at 5 in the morning and concluded around 9 at night. Saturdays I'd tackle paperwork and inventory analysis. Sundays were theoretically family days, but inevitably I'd receive calls about some crisis, a malfunctioning commercial unit at a hospital, a delayed shipment requiring immediate resolution. Always something demanding attention. Dylan was at Princeton studying economics, following my entrepreneurial path. Natalie was at Columbia for communications. Combined tuition cost us $155,000 annually, but I paid it gladly without hesitation. They were exceptional kids, brilliant and ambitious. They'd text occasionally, mostly requesting money transfers, sometimes just checking in briefly. Claire handled most of the parenting communication, the discussions about academic performance, romantic relationships, weekend plans. Dad's perpetually working, I once overheard Natalie tell her roommate on speakerphone. "Mom says he loves that warehouse more than his own family." It stung deeply, but I convinced myself I was building something substantial for them. Every 16-hour workday, every missed school concert or lacrosse game, every postponed family vacation, it was all investment in their future security. The business would eventually become theirs. The accumulated wealth would ensure they never struggled financially like I had. My father had been dead 7 years by then, but sometimes I'd still hear his voice echoing in my mind. "Nobody ever lay dying wishing they'd spent more time at the office, son." But I'd pushed that voice aside, along with the increasing emotional distance in Claire's eyes, the way she'd started staying out progressively later, drinking more Chardonnay, treating our bedroom like a hotel room she merely passed through. That I thought we were constructing an empire together. I didn't realize she was meticulously planning its complete demolition. Thursday, March 21st. That date is permanently seared into my memory like a cattle brand. I left the distribution center early for once, around 2:30 in the afternoon, because it was our 22nd wedding anniversary. I had 36 roses on the passenger seat and reservations at Le Jardin, the French restaurant where I'd proposed all those years ago. The first thing I noticed was Gregory Mansfield's silver Porsche Cayenne in my circular driveway. I recognized that vehicle because Claire had pointed it out at the country club 3 months earlier, going on about the custom interior and 6-figure price tag. The second thing I noticed was that our master bedroom curtains were drawn closed, which seemed unusual for mid-afternoon. That I stood in my own marble foyer for a full 5 minutes, roses in hand, listening to the sounds drifting down from upstairs. My bedroom. My bed. The bed where my children were conceived. The laughter is what finally made me move. Not guilty, furtive laughter or nervous laughter, but comfortable, intimate laughter, like they'd been doing this so long it had become their routine that I didn't confront them. Instead, I sat in my truck for 3.5 hours, watching Gregory leave my house at 6:45, kissing my wife goodbye at my front door like he owned the entire property. Claire waved from the doorway wearing the silk robe I'd bought her last Christmas. When I finally entered my own house at 8:30, she was freshly showered, preparing dinner, humming contentedly to herself. "You're late," she said without looking up from the stovetop. "Anniversary or not, you could have at least called." The divorce papers were served the following morning at exactly 9 o'clock. I was in the middle of our weekly management meeting when the process server walked directly into our conference room in front of 47 employees. "Michael Brennan?" the server asked formally. "Yes, that's me. You've been served." Kevin, my brother, stood up like he was prepared to physically remove the guy, but I waved him off. My hands were surprisingly steady as I opened that manila envelope. Claire wasn't simply requesting a divorce. She was alleging abandonment, systematic emotional abuse, financial manipulation, hidden offshore assets, and serial infidelity with multiple partners. Every single accusation was a complete fabrication. But that didn't matter even slightly. Gregory had constructed a legal masterpiece of destruction. The first mediation meeting occurred in Gregory's downtown office, a calculated power play demonstrating who controlled everything. Claire sat beside him wearing a new Chanel suit, diamond earrings I'd never seen before catching the recessed lighting. She refused to make direct eye contact with me. "My client has been suffering in devastating silence for years," Gregory began, his hand resting possessively on Claire's forearm. "Your workaholism, your emotional unavailability, your pathological prioritization of money over family. We have comprehensive documentation spanning 6 years." "What documentation?" Carl Henderson, my attorney, asked skeptically. Gregory produced an entire file box. Journals Claire had supposedly maintained meticulously detailing my neglect. Photographs of me at the warehouse during family events. Bank statements she claimed revealed suspicious wire transfers. Even sworn affidavits from country club members claiming they'd witnessed my controlling behavior and verbal aggression toward her. "This is complete fiction," I said, my voice cracking with disbelief. "Claire, tell them this is lies. You know none of this is true." She finally looked directly at me, and her eyes were absolutely frigid. "The only lie was pretending our marriage meant anything to you, Mike." Gregory helped me finally see the truth. The forensic accountant they retained was Gregory's fraternity brother, though we didn't discover that connection until much later. He testified I'd been systematically hiding assets, transferring money to offshore accounts, deliberately undervaluing the business. Every denial cost me thousands more in legal fees. Every document I had to produce consumed time and money I didn't have. Carl was overwhelmed, completely outgunned, and I suspect genuinely frightened of Gregory's reputation in family court. "Mike, they're requesting full primary custody of the twins," Carl informed me during a brief recess. "Even though they're 20, it affects support calculations significantly. They're legal adults. How can she possibly get custody of adults? Legal adults who remain financially dependent students. Gregory knows every possible loophole in family law. He's also apparently close friends with Judge Morrison. Judge Franklin Morrison. I'd actually voted for him twice, believing his campaign rhetoric about fairness and protecting families, but watching him nod approvingly at Gregory's every argument while dismissing Carl's objections with visible irritation, I realized justice was just another business transaction for those with the right connections. The final hearing lasted 7 brutal hours. Gregory painted me as a monster who'd hidden millions while emotionally terrorizing my family for years. Judge Morrison's ruling was swift and absolutely devastating. Claire received the Victorian estate, the entire business, all investment accounts, and primary custody with maximum support payments calculated on my previous substantial income, not my current unemployment. I was left with literally nothing except the clothes I was wearing and a 1998 Toyota Camry I'd kept for sentimental reasons because it was my first car. "This is justice," Gregory announced loudly enough for everyone in the courthouse corridor to hear. Then quieter, stepping close just for me. "She's incredible in bed, by the way. Every single night." The studio apartment on Chester Avenue cost $850 monthly and featured a view of a brick wall and the perpetual smell of fried food from the Vietnamese restaurant downstairs. After 3 months existing there, I'd memorized every water stain on the ceiling, every crack in the yellowed plaster, every hour the upstairs neighbor's infant cried inconsolably. My diet consisted of instant ramen, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever was marked clearance at the dollar store. The worst part wasn't the poverty itself. It was the complete invisibility. Former employees crossed the street when they spotted me approaching. Guys from the country club pretended not to recognize me at the gas station. Even Kevin, my own brother, had to maintain distance because Claire had retained him at the company and he desperately needed the income to support his family. "I'm so sorry, Mike," he'd whispered during our one secret meeting at a highway rest stop. "She monitors everything obsessively. Gregory has her convinced you're planning some kind of revenge. If I'm caught talking to you, I'm immediately terminated." My checking account held exactly $980. The court had garnished wages from the temporary warehouse job I'd found, confiscating 72% for alimony and back support. Judge Morrison had based payments on my previous income, completely ignoring my current circumstances. Carl Henderson had attempted to file for modification, but that required another substantial retainer I simply didn't have. Dylan still refused all communication. Natalie had answered once, crying hysterically, saying Mom had shown her conclusive proof of my affairs, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, things that didn't exist but that Gregory had made appear convincingly real. The isolation was total and suffocating. At 45, I was more alone than I'd been at 24. Except now I didn't have youth or hope sustaining me. It was a Saturday afternoon when I started sorting through the storage unit, the one thing Claire hadn't known about because I'd rented it years ago in my father's name to preserve his belongings after he passed. Most of it was worthless junk. Old tools, photograph albums, his collection of baseball cards that turned out to be completely worthless despite his certainty they'd be valuable someday. But in a shoebox marked important papers, I found something that made me sit down hard on the concrete floor. A savings passbook from Philadelphia National Trust dated January 18, 1960. The name on the account was mine, Michael James Brennan. The opening deposit was $50. Paperclipped to it was a note in my grandfather's careful, deliberate handwriting. "For my grandson's future. Do not touch except in dire need. Walter Brennan." I vaguely remembered the story. Grandpa Walter had opened the account when I was born, his first grandchild. $50 represented nearly a week's wages for him back then. My father had mentioned it occasionally over the years, but we'd all assumed the account had been closed during one of the numerous bank mergers since 1960. Philadelphia National Trust had been acquired by Commerce Bank, which was bought by Republic Federal, which eventually got absorbed by Wells Fargo. The passbook was probably worthless, a relic from another era. But sitting in that storage unit, surrounded by the remnants of my father's life, I felt a strange compulsion to see it through. My grandfather had been a simple man who worked the Ford assembly line for 42 years. He died when I was 11, but I remembered his hands, scarred, calloused, and strong, and how he'd always slip me a dollar bill when my parents weren't watching. "Save half, spend half," he'd always say with a knowing smile. "Time makes money grow, Michael. Remember that. Time is everything." The next morning, I put on my last decent shirt, the one I reserved for job interviews, and drove to the Wells Fargo branch that used to be Philadelphia National Trust decades ago. The building had been renovated multiple times, all glass and modern architecture now, nothing resembling the brick building my grandfather would have known. The teller was a young woman named Diane, professional and efficient. "How can I help you today, sir?" "I have an extremely old account," I said, sliding the yellowed passbook across the granite counter. "From 1960. I'd like to close it out." Diane frowned at the ancient passbook. Typed something into her computer. Frowned deeper. Typed more rapidly. "Mr. Brennan, could you wait just one moment? I need to get my manager immediately." Great, I thought bitterly. They're going to inform me the account was escheat to the state decades ago, or closed for inactivity. Another dead end in a life now full of them. Diane returned with Lawrence Chen, the branch manager, a distinguished man in his 50s who looked like he'd witnessed everything in his 30 years of banking. But the expression on his face suggested he'd never seen this. "Mr. Brennan," he said, his voice carefully controlled and professional. "Could you please come with me to my office? We need to discuss this account in private." I followed him, my stomach tight with anxious anticipation. Whatever was coming, I could handle it. After losing absolutely everything, what was one more disappointment? But as we walked past the teller windows and security cameras, I noticed Lawrence's hands were trembling slightly as he carried my grandfather's passbook like it was made of gold. Lawrence Chen's office was elegant, mahogany furniture and leather chairs with certifications and awards covering one entire wall. He gestured for me to sit, then carefully placed my grandfather's passbook on his desk like it might spontaneously combust. His computer screen faced away from me, and I watched his fingers fly across the keyboard, his expression growing progressively more incredulous with each keystroke. "Mr. Brennan," he began, then stopped, cleared his throat deliberately, and started again. "This account is absolutely extraordinary. Your grandfather didn't just open a regular savings account. He opened what was called a Century Growth Account, a specialized product Philadelphia National Trust offered very briefly in 1960. He pulled out a calculator and legal pad, making rapid notations. The account was established with compound interest at 7.8% annually, contractually locked for a minimum of 45 years. The bank honored this rate through every single merger because it was a binding contractual obligation. No one could touch it, not even you, until you turned 45. I turned 45 4 months ago, I said, my mouth suddenly bone dry. Exactly. The account became accessible to you in November. Mr. Brennan, do you understand how compound interest operates over extended periods? In theory, yes. Lawrence rotated his monitor toward me. This is not theory. This is your current account balance. The number on the screen didn't make logical sense. I blinked, counted the digits carefully, blinked again, $5, $247, $839.47. That's impossible, I whispered. It was $50. $50 at 7.8% compound interest over 64 years, Mr. Brennan. Lawrence pulled up a detailed spreadsheet showing year-by-year growth. Your grandfather chose the perfect financial instrument at the perfect moment in history. By year 20, it was worth $243. By year 40, it had reached $11,847. The real magic happened in the final 20 years. Exponential growth. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. This is genuinely mine. There's no mistake. No mistake whatsoever. But Mr. Brennan, that's not everything. Lawrence opened a filing cabinet and extracted a folder that looked as ancient as the passbook itself. Your grandfather also established an investment addendum to the account. In 1965, he instructed the bank to purchase $100 worth of shares in a small textile company called Berkshire Hathaway. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett's company. The very same. In 1965, those shares cost approximately $18 each. Your grandfather purchased 5 shares. Today, after multiple stock splits and 6 decades of extraordinary growth, those shares are worth approximately $9.4 million. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what I was hearing. Lawrence poured me water from a crystal decanter, and I drank without tasting anything. Your grandfather left detailed instructions, Lawrence continued, pulling out a yellowed envelope with my name written in faded ink. This was to be given to you when you accessed the account. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside, in my grandfather's careful handwriting, "Dear Michael, if you are reading this, you have reached the age of wisdom and found yourself in genuine need. I knew nothing of your future when I wrote this, only that life has storms and every man needs a safe harbor. Use this gift wisely. Trust no one completely, not even those who share your bed. The world is full of Gregory Mansfields and Claires, though they wore different names in my day. Your grandfather, Walter Brennan. P.S. Never let them see all your cards, Michael. Never." 2 weeks later, Gregory Mansfield was arrested for fraud and judicial corruption. Claire lost everything. And I finally understood what Grandpa Walter had been trying to teach me all along.